here as well. I'm not the only one from Africa. So good to see a lot of people here. Welcome.
What time is it? It's like 9 a.m. for you, is that right?
Yeah, 9 a.m. Yeah, as well. Okay.
Yeah, great. Okay, let's get started. So, oh my goodness, it's 3 a.m. somewhere. Not sure where that is. We've got people from all over the world. Fantastic. It's so amazing to see people who are so passionate about Excel and financial modeling that they are willing to get up in the middle of the night. So it is just gone 6 p.m. here in Sydney. I know that it's 7 a.m. in London because I'm on London time at the moment with training, and it is 9 a.m. for you. So welcome to Renier Wessels. Have I said that correctly? Vessels?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty well done.
Welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. So Renier is recently a Microsoft MVP, so congratulations on that. And he's also the founder of the South African Financial Modelling World Cup. And I know that a lot of work goes into organising that competition. So I'd love to hear more about that. First of all, with becoming an MVP, how has your life changed since becoming an MVP? Is there like, just amazing opportunities, just money, projects, people throwing themselves at you, Is it not like that?
I wouldn't say that, no, but it's definitely a broadening of the community, which is an amazing community. The Excel community is just amazing, and then the South African MVPs, my fellow South African MVPs, we're only 12. They've been very welcoming and very willing to share all of what I do, and I think it's a great community to be a part of. So a lot more followers on LinkedIn as well, which is great to expand the network, and just more opportunity. Because I think what a lot of people don't know is that as an MVP, it's all about what you do for the community, and you do it for free actually. So it's out of the love of the game that you do a lot of things, and
That's
it's
wonderful
not for
community.
money and fame.
Really
Yeah.
supportive. Yeah, lovely. Yeah. And tell us about just if you've got a sec, just tell us a little bit about the competition that you organise. So that's just for Africa or South Africa? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's called the South African Excel Championships, but we've never denied anyone who wants to participate because our currency is not as strong as the US dollar or the Australian dollar for that matter. We're able to offer the competition for a lot at a lower cost. So we've always offered people to join in with the South African Excel Championships. So what we do is we actually create South African cases, or we try to keep it as South African as possible. So it's South African themed cases, and it's essentially problem solving in Excel, like an esports, under time pressure. But again, the idea behind it is also to create more community and to actually expand the network. And I think a lot of people in South Africa don't even know about financial modeling. It's not as known a career option locally, and it's quite nice to allow people to actually get more familiar with the options that are available, because the opportunities are immense across the continent.
I can see that we've got Chintan from Benoni, one of your fellow African MVPs on there. Yeah. So I know that, with all of the new things that have come out in Excel in the last couple of years, for me, the two that have made the biggest change or the biggest impact on financial modelers are dynamic arrays and Power Query. And those are the things that you're going to talk about today, and specifically how they impact month end. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to tell us about today.
Yeah, thanks. So I think the big thing to note there is that I think a lot of financial modelers out there are still not using dynamic inputs and dynamic outputs. We tend to actually be set in our ways in a sense, and I think with a lot of people it's still also a matter of compatibility with older versions of Excel. Wherever I go, I tell people to get Excel or Microsoft 365, because it's actually the value that you get from the cost is the benefit outweighs the cost by far. But yeah, today the idea is to showcase, just to show people a bit about what does dynamic inputs and outputs look like, and the power that's behind that. And I mean, I've built financial models that are dynamic from an input and an output perspective, and the clients love it. And what's amazing about it is it's scalable. And the other thing that makes it awesome is the fact that you've got one formula or one function that spills a whole array of information. So there's only one thing to audit or one thing to check. You don't have to check 1,000 rows for formula contingency. And I think that's some of the benefits, but we'll get into that now. I guess can I share my screen and start? Perfect. Let's just get that going. So what we'll do today is we'll go through a couple of slides quickly just to explain why am I talking to you about this today, what are some of the benefits, and then we'll get into the actual example, and I'll share all of the inputs as well as the models that I showed today. I'll share that with everyone afterwards. I want you to actually sit back and listen and see and take in, and then you can always look at the recording later. But what I'll also do is I'll share on my YouTube an end-to-end process of how I built the Power Query side of things as well as the dynamic array side of things, so that you can follow me along and do it yourself as well. So today is not a tutorial. Today is just a show and tell kind of thing. And then we'll get into
I'm glad you mentioned that, because people do sort of get really caught up in taking screenshots and wanting to follow along and taking notes. And I think it's good to just sit back and just kind of, you're just going to give us the overall view, and then you can go and you'll send us some stuff later that we can go through in more detail if we want to.
Yeah, and I think it also allows people to actually ask some questions, and hopefully we'll have time left at the end where people can actually ask their questions, and we can also hear from the folks on the chat. Right. So I'm not following the chat, so if there's anything, please feel free to stop me. So the agenda today is I'm going to quickly talk about who am I. We're going to talk about legacy versus month-end processes and what that looks like. I'm using a month-end process because I think that's one of the areas that I've seen something like this be the most powerful or have the most impact, and that's why I'm using this example. But I mean, it can easily be used in any kind of input data. So if it's financial model or any kind of reporting that you need to do, if you're doing the same thing every month and you need to do it from scratch every month, then you're doing it wrong. And I guess that's the message today. Then we'll talk about Power Query at a glance. We'll talk about dynamic array functions, and we'll do a show and tell. And I'm saying at a glance because this is just scratching the surface. But I promise for the power users out there, I promise it'll be worth your while as well, because I will be showing some pretty powerful stuff as well. But let's start with the beginning. Quick, who am I? We've spoken about that roughly. This is an excerpt from my CV actually. So I'm Renier Wessels, chartered accountant, newly minted Microsoft Excel via MVP, and then also an automation specialist. Currently working for Bidvest Advisory Services in the Bidvest Alice team as head of automation and digital consulting. And I love my job and everything that I do on a day-to-day basis. And I particularly love Excel because that's where it all started. You can also join me on my socials and follow me. There's a little QR code there to my link tree that takes you to all my socials, and then you. Happy to have you reach out to me as well if you'd like to discuss anything. It's all about the network. All right, so let's talk about legacy month-end processing. So this is what a legacy month-end process looks like in my mind. So we've got four major processes. We've got a data collection. We've got working papers that we set up. We might have some transactions or adjustments as financial advisors or financial directors or financial managers or accountants or whatever you do as a job, and then you have reporting. But I think if you take a typical financial modeling process, a lot of it fits into this as well. You might have inputs, input data, and input data can be in any shape or form. It can be in PDF documents. It can be text documents. It can be comma separated values documents. It could be in Excel. And I've always joked and said we've got a lot of technology in between, but a lot of these processes start in Excel and end in Excel. So why not just use Excel? I think a lot of people also tend to want to use technologies to solve problems, but they're not using Excel properly. They could have done everything end to end in Excel. So I'm not saying Excel is the solution to everything, because sometimes when it's really big things and you need to scale, you might need something like Python from a data science perspective. You might need something from SQL from a database perspective. But for most month-end processing, you can use Excel end to end. So what it could look like is every month I need to go and extract data from the ERP system. I potentially need to do it manually, because not all ERP systems just open up their APIs and I can just connect to it. I don't necessarily have access to the database directly, so I need to do exports directly from the system every single month, and I need to sit and wait for the exports to run. Then I go and manually pull that into Excel, and there I need to do data integrity and reconciliations and that kind of thing. I need to do that every single month in the same fashion. And then I might have some journal entries or post-close entries that I need to do, and I need to potentially use Excel to determine what those are, and then go back into the ERP system and go do that manually, and then do another manual extraction, and then sit and pull it back into Excel, and then I need to do my reporting manually. And that is how a lot of people still do it to this day. But it doesn't need to be like that. And that's the power here. So I might need to do my reporting in Power BI or maybe even Excel, and a lot of people do that. So when we look at a modern process, nothing changes except that I don't need to do all that. Every time I said manual, I didn't need to do that. So I could potentially have used Power Query to actually extract the data directly from the ERP system, or the data that I've extracted could be automatically pulled into the report that I've already built. So I just need to do a refresh, and as soon as the refresh is done, the new month's data is in, the reconciliation's already done, the post-close entries have already been calculated for me, and then maybe I can even use Power Query to through an API update the ERP system with the post-close or journal entries that's necessary. Or I could use something like Power Automate, which is also available to Microsoft 365 users. And then I just click refresh again, and my Power Query pulls that back into my Excel after the post-close entries are done. And then I can use dynamic arrays and dynamic charts to dynamically update all my reporting. And that's the power here. So the benefit of a dynamic array is the fact that it's a formula, it's a function that automatically updates. And if my calculation on my workbook is set to automatic, it'll automatically update once the Power Query refreshes with new data. So there's no extra refresh button that's necessary, which is how it trumps pivot tables. But we'll also talk about the drawbacks, and I'll show a conventional pivot table and how that's powerful in certain situations as well, once we get into the Excel side of things. So just to sort of visualize it, sometimes it's good to just see a visual representation of what this could look like. So essentially, what is Power Query? Why do we use it? And essentially, Power Query allows us to connect to virtually anything, and it's built into Excel. So a lot of people don't know that Power Query actually comes standard with Excel. I think ever since Excel 2016, I think it came stock standard, and I think you can install it into Excel 2013 as well. I might be mistaken, but everything post that it's stock standard. So if you go to your data tab and you click on Get Data, you're essentially at the start of Power Query. So it allows us to perform what we call in the data world the ETL process. Some people do ELT, others do ETL, but it's essentially short for extract, transform, load. So we want to extract data from source, We want to transform that data into the shape or into the format or into the structure that we needed that's optimal. And then we want to load that data back into something, either the data model or into a table, into Excel. And what's immensely powerful with Power Query as well is the fact that it also sits at the back of Power BI. So Power Query is the data engine behind Power BI as well. There's subtle differences, but for the most part, you can copy paste between your queries and connections in Excel and your queries and connections in Power BI seamlessly. So yeah, then if we look at the different sources, and this is definitely not an exhaustive list. I got this little visual from experttraining.com, and the link is there, and I'll share the links as well. But essentially, those are just some of the things I can connect to. So we can see there a lot of these databases are, for instance, SAP HANA or SAP HANA, which is an ERP system, and we can connect to SharePoint folders. We can connect to Excel folders, PDFs as well. A lot of people don't even know that we can extract data directly from a PDF, and I'll show that today. Even things like Salesforce, if your company uses Salesforce or GitHub or Google Analytics or anything virtually. And then, I mean, an open query allows you to connect to APIs as well. So I've connected to various APIs throughout some of the projects that I've worked on as well. So a pretty big list of data sources that I can connect to and automatically extract data from and refresh data from. So some of the features that we use Power Query for involve data transformation, like I said. So if I need to do filtering, sorting, data cleansing, column management, grouping and aggregation, pivot, unpivot, and any conditional logic, and we'll cover some of that in the example file as well. If I'm looking at data shaping, from a data shaping perspective, I have the ability to, like in SQL, for instance, I've got the ability to append and merge queries. I can do transformations by example. I can do columns by example. I can also do column data profiling. So there's various sort of Excel data science involved on the Power Query side as well. And it's immensely powerful once you start working in it. And the nice thing about Power Query is it's low to no code, but it does have a powerful code engine sitting behind it that uses M code or M query language that is pretty understandable and pretty easy to learn. A lot simpler than DAX to actually transform your data and to do a lot more powerful things. Like, I'm just thinking of an example, like list generate allows you to create a dynamic list that allows you to loop through elements. So it becomes a programming language on its own. And we always say that Excel is the most widely used programming language in the world. But it also sits at the back of Excel, also sits other programming languages like VBA, like Office scripts, and like M query as well, or M language, or M code, whatever you want to call it. Then the other benefits involve things like automation and reusability. So like we said in the description, the fact that you can data refresh at any point in time, and it pulls out the new data from source. It allows you to do things like create functions that can take parameters, so that you can dynamically update a parameter if you want to update a date or update a file path. It can change what you extract. So you can actually take inputs. Thinking about a financial model, you can have inputs and setups, and you could say, I want data from this company, and then your query actually can take that as a parameter and extract only the data for that company, which makes it a lot more lightweight and a lot simpler as well. The other nice thing is that as you go, Power Query also records the steps that you perform, and it automatically does that. And you can easily go back a step and see how your data moves and how your data shapes while you are going through your steps. And then, of course, like I said, integration with Power BI. So if you want to use another powerful, nice looking visualization engine. It's quick and easy to pull that into Power BI and visualize. But I mean, modern Excel also allows a lot of dynamic charting and a lot of dynamic visualization. So sometimes not even necessary to go into Power BI these days. So if we talk about dynamic array functions, the nice thing about dynamic array function is that, like I told you when we spoke before the session, one function or formula can give me a whole array of information. Potentially, one function or formula can create my whole page or my whole sheet's information that I require. So I don't need to, like in the old days, if I'm auditing a model, I don't need to go through all 1,000 rows and check that all the formulas are contiguous. I know that there's one function or formula that I need to actually audit. And the nice thing is with things like let,
yeah, huge advantage to have that, of knowing that if that one corner cell is correct, then the rest of them will be correct as well, and don't have to worry about auditing, which is one of the many things I love about dynamic arrays.
Yeah. And then the other thing is with things like let, you can actually create a function or formula that's readable. And that's a lot simpler to audit. It might look a lot more complex. It might look a lot more bulky, but I can name my steps. I can follow steps. I can go back through steps. So it makes it a lot simpler these days than to audit a nested some ifs formula that is 300 characters long.
I think at the moment, just because people are not, well, a lot of people are still not used to the syntax of the let, but I think once it becomes a bit more mainstream, let is a lot easier to audit, because you're not repeating that great big long string over and over again.
Yeah, and also if you need to fix your formula or you need to go through your formula steps, it's actually simpler to find the issue in your functions. But we'll cover an example of that as well a bit later on. So yeah, this, like we said, these functions can dynamically spill results across multiple cells, across arrays of data, fills adjacent cells as needed, and they're powerful for data analysis and automation in Excel. The nice thing is it's scalable. So if my data grows, it grows with my data. I don't need to go and pull my formula down or lock my references anymore. With modern Excel and dynamic arrays, I build it once and it's done. So the nice thing about Power Query is Power Query spills into a table. If I bring it into a table on my Excel, which means that my references are essentially referring to the whole table. And if rows get added or if rows get removed, I don't need to go and update my functions, my formulas, because I'm referring to the whole column of data, and we'll look at that as well. So it's referenced with the hashtag operator. So the hash operator is essentially how you reference it, and we'll look at examples. Support is limited between workbooks, so that's something to note. So the idea behind modern Excel is that we shouldn't be working in various different workbooks. If I'm pulling information from a different workbook, I need to pull it into my workbook through Power Query. That's a lot more robust than referring to a dynamic array in a different workbook. That could severely impact outcomes as well if we do that. So I tend to not try and do that at all these days. We'll also look at spill errors, and there's an example of a spill error down here on the sheet, which is essentially just showing that my dynamic array is trying to fill a range that is already filled with something else, with another dynamic array or with other data. So and then the amazing thing is the fact that dynamic array functions are these days supported over pretty much all of the legacy functions as well. So you can use it in a SUMIF, you can use it in an if, you can use it in a COUNTIF. COUNTIF has a bit of a there's a bit of a drawback on the COUNTIF side. We'll maybe cover that as well, maybe in the tutorial. But there are ways around all of this these days with things like by row and by col, and the lambda functions as well, which is pretty scary to a lot of people, I know. But once you start truly understanding it, and once you start working with it, it's immensely powerful and immensely impactful in the way that you think about problem solving in Excel and about automation in general. So don't be scared. So I'm just going to quickly. Sorry,
I have a
Danielle.
question. Actually, that might be a good time to ask question. We've got one from Felicia. Hi, Felicia. She's here in Sydney. She just is having some trouble with getting her system in the back end to create a secure interface with Excel, and her system administrator doesn't seem to understand how to do that. So is there what language should she use when you're trying to get a system to talk to Excel? I mean, it's not one of those options that's called priorities. That's a customized system. So what she's asking is, if it's not one of those options with Power Query, is it something that can be customized and ask for that?
Yeah. So I mean, if I'm reading the right question, is sorry, I'm probably. Okay, so we use a customized ERP system called Priority.
Okay.
What
Yeah,
connection
Hiran
do I use?
has
Okay.
answered her question. Sufficient.
To be able to create a secure interface, our system administrator don't seem to understand my requirements. So yeah, I think a lot of database administrators are careful to open up the databases to things, and I think Hiran was actually spot on in saying that you could use something like a view. There's many options to actually follow. And maybe we can take this discussion offline, Felicia, if you want to reach out to me. But a view is one option. It really depends on the way that it's structured and if the ports are open, because not all databases are actually publicly available. And it could be that you need to be able to access it through your local, maybe like an Office VPN or through a specific gateway. But anything is possible these days. I think it's just important to know how to ask and what to ask and how to safeguard your data and your databases. But it can if there's a SQL database behind it, it is connected. You can connect to it. Whether it's publicly available, it depends. So it depends on your use case a little bit. I hope I've answered it.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
Um,
Got a list of dynamic array functions here. That's great because I always wonder, it's more also the ones that are not compatible with dynamic arrays that can sometimes trip you up as well. So you try to sort of build a function and then realize that it's not supported. There's a couple of but these all will work with dynamic arrays.
Yeah.
Some of them you have to use a dynamic array, right?
Yes. So, and I think if you get tripped up with something, then you might not be following the right method or the methodology. Maybe if you're getting tripped up, it might be that your data is not structured in the right way, or it could be that you just need something like a by row or a by col these days to actually do the function. And I'll show an example of that. If I'm trying to sum, for instance, I'm trying to sum a dynamically spilled array of columns, then I need to do the by col function because I can't just do a sum on it. And I could potentially do a sum index, but it's just knowing what you want to achieve and knowing how to ask the right questions to get to the right answers. But yeah, I just wanted to show this is page one of some of the dynamic array functions that are out there, and I've used quite a lot of them in the example that I'll show a bit later. I think the MVP to talk about there is XLOOKUP, and I mean XMatch as well, which is pretty amazing, very powerful. And we had a discussion between a couple of people last week, and we essentially spoke about VLOOKUP. Is there still a use case for VLOOKUP? And I do think that there's still use cases for VLOOKUP. But I mean, with XLOOKUP, it pretty much can replace a lot of the things that you would have done with an index match in the old days, a VLOOKUP, an HLOOKUP, a lookup function. All of those are essentially replaced by the XLOOKUP, and it's pretty amazing. And it can also dynamically spill multiple rows and columns of data as well. And and yeah, I think filter we'll cover quite a bit as well. Sort by and sort, pretty amazing, and then unique I use a lot, and then sequence from an Excel esports perspective is used quite a lot. Not as much when building a model, but I do use sequences when I'm building a financial model that needs to run over, let's say, 60 periods. Then I want to dynamically
All
spill a
the
row of
time.
60
All
numbers.
the time.
Pretty
Yeah.
easy.
I
And
don't know
even
how I
dates.
love it. Yeah. With dates. Yeah. Love it.
Yeah. Because you can sequence directly from referencing a date and say I want to be able to sequence it for 365 days, and it'll spill a whole range of 365 days. So it's very powerful. There's some more. Some of the MVPs that I'll also cover would be group by and pivot by, which are new functions if you're on the current channel. So the computer that I'm running this presentation on is on the current channel. It's not insider or beta or anything like that. My personal laptop is, but everything that I'm showing here is available in the current channel of Microsoft 365. Um, and and I think a lot of these functions that I see here allows you to really structure your data, restructure your data, shape your data in any shape or form, whether it's different rows, whether it's whether it's wrapping it into rows, whether it's taking the first one or taking the last one, or taking three from the front or three from the back, or dropping. Um, you can do pretty much anything these days with an array of data in Excel, and then I think I mean other MVPs would be Lambda and Let, which are complete game changers in the modern Excel ecospace. So we'll cover quite a couple of them in the examples as well. And like I said, the examples will be available to you afterwards, and I'll do a full step by step end to end build of how I built the Power Query side as well as the dynamic array side. So okay, so this is where the slides end. So if there's any questions, we could maybe quickly.
Yeah, we've actually got some pretty detailed questions coming through, and I don't want to sort of bog you down
Okay,
and run out of time
perfect.
for your demo. So what I
Okay,
was
let's cover
thinking
some of
is,
them
yeah, do you want to do
later
that
on.
now, or do you want to wait until the end? So
No, let me quickly showcase the Excel side of things,
yeah,
and then we'll get back
okay,
into
okay.
questions afterwards. So let me quickly just swap to Excel. Uh, just get there.
Yeah, there's some pretty detailed questions there. I was thinking I can if we don't have an time because we hard stop at an hour, so we can I can send you the questions later. I know you're
Yeah,
gonna
perfect.
put together some stuff afterwards for us, so I can certainly send them to you.
Yeah. So like I said, this example is from a normal accounting month-end sort of process perspective, because I feel like that is one of the areas where you can find the most, or that has the highest impact value with a process like this, which is why I'm showcasing this example. But this is just an example. You can pretty much use any input data that you need to recurringly use. So the data that I used was extracted from a South African ERP system called Pastel, or Pastel Partner, and it's not known for particularly easily structured data. If I look at how the data looks beforehand, it's sometimes pretty human readable, but not necessarily well structured from an automation perspective. So the trial balance that I pulled into the actual model, and I used Power Query to pull it in from the actual PDF document itself. Actually looks like this. So you can see that it's not necessarily structured well from a lookup perspective or from an informational perspective yet. Last year's is on the left-hand side for some reason, and then I've got debits and credits on the right-hand side. I've got a lot of noise in between. I've got subtotals in between. My headers are not starting on the first row, but Power Query doesn't struggle with any of this. This is something that Power Query can eat up easily. So just to show what that looks like, From a GL perspective, I used a typical example of, let's say, for instance, we're running this process monthly, so I want to do an extraction of the data every month. So I extracted the monthly data, and the amazing thing with Power Query is the fact that I can easily go and drop the next month. I can go and drop October 2024's data in here and just click refresh, and the data will contain October 2024. Nothing else that I need to do um, if my Power Query is built properly. So the data is literally just in a folder structure over here, and I could connect it to Power Query quite easily and quite seamlessly. And once you start playing in it, or playing with it, it's pretty simple. You can see that the data is not massive. The GL is about 18,000 rows, which is not crazy, but it can handle more than the Excel 1,048,000 rows that we used to be limited to. So we can easily. I've seen people pull in tens of millions, even hundreds of millions. Once you get to that, I might want to use a different technology to do some data aggregation first, or I might even use Power Query to do some of the aggregation first, because I don't want to necessarily load 10 million lines of data into my model, because then I'm missing the point. So there's a lot of aggregation that you could potentially do upfront in the transformation phase within Power Query that doesn't need to spill into Excel.
Yeah, it's a great way of handling, just massive amounts of data that very often will pull stuff in that you can't even look at in Excel. You have to open it up in Power Query in order to even look at it, and that's something we couldn't have done a few years ago.
Yeah. So if we go into Power Query itself, just to showcase what this looks like, I've switched on some visualizations or some visual elements that just tells me and shows me certain things about my data that you can switch on. I think it's called the column quality or column distribution on the view tab, but this allows me to quickly see if there's any issues, and you can see that there's quite a couple of steps that I performed, and like I said, I'll showcase every single step, how I did it a bit later on. The nice thing about this is I can quickly see my data. I can quickly go back into my steps. I can start from source. So if I need to audit it, if I need to audit someone else's things, I could actually start with the source and walk through every single step. So very much step based. I just wanted to show an example from the chart of accounts, for instance. So the chart of accounts is essentially directly from Pastel. Is essentially just a list of all the accounts in the actual ERP system, with a category code and a category, which is quite important when we want to do financial analysis, because it's important to know which accounts are my fixed assets, for instance, which are current liabilities and things like that. And then I also used an expanded a reference table that's directly within my model itself, that just expands on the classification. So between statement classification and a second layer of classification. But I could easily pull that in, for those of you that have worked in SQL before. It's like a join. In Power Query, it's called merged. So merge queries. So essentially, I merged the queries and pulled in the statement classification and second classification layer. And what's nice about that is I can dynamically also see which accounts are not mapped and which are mapped between my expanded chart of accounts and my normal chart of accounts. So it moves with your ERP system. You don't need to go and necessarily change things up every single month. You don't need to remap things every month. You could just map the new ones and unmap the old ones, which makes it pretty simple and quick and easy to work with. But what's also amazing is if I go back to source, you'll see that this is what the source looked like. So the source was actually a text file. I think it was a normal ASCII text file. So it wasn't in any good shape at all. I could do a split column by delimiter. which allowed me to put it into columns. The change type step runs automatically. It wasn't necessary at this point in time. I could just remove that. When I basically removed a couple of the noisy rows. So I just need to also do a shout out to my friend Alec from my BI. This is his data. He allowed me to use his demo data. So thanks to Alec. And Alec has actually built my BI, which is also a local platform which is completely automated, the Pastel backend, and it's completely done in Excel, and it's done through Power Query, and it's done through a bit of VBA, but it's essentially a program that allows you to interrogate your data. So just a shout out, thanks to Alec for lending me his data. So yeah, I basically removed the top rows. I transposed the table because I saw that my rows or my actual column names are spanning across two different rows. So instead of trying to fix this manually, a little trick I learned from I think it was from Win Hopkins was to actually transpose the table, which essentially makes rows columns and columns rows. So it just tips it on its side. So transposing the table allows me to see that my two columns can be joined now, and then I just did a merge column, which put everything in one column. Transposing it back puts everything in one row now, and now I can just go and promote my headers, and that takes my headers up into the header side of things. And then I mean a lot of things that I do involves filtering rows, but carefully filtering rows, because I don't want to filter out rows that I don't that I'll need in the future. But for instance, filtering out all of the blank rows that I could see that there was a lot of sort of blank rows in between, I could quickly go and sometimes it's just as simple as right clicking and saying filter for me in this column, filter where it does not equal blank, essentially. We'll remove all blanks in this first column. But like I said, I'll show all my steps in a step-by-step guide afterwards. But you can see how the data moves and structures and gets shaped into different things. I even added a custom column to bring the financial category across, and then filled that down so that I could actually keep the financial category information. I don't know where that is now, but I could keep the financial category information as well, and I could filter out all of the information that I didn't require. So I could reshape this data into a good shape and exactly what I needed, without any coding, essentially. It's just clicking on steps, and I've got a properly built chart of accounts. The nice thing is I haven't changed anything on the core data. So the core data is still as it is from the ERP system. If I had connected to the ERP system directly, and my source was the ERP system, then I could shape this data in exactly the shape that I require it to be. And I did the same for the GLs, for the trial balance, for the cash book, for the debtors ledger, for the debtors balances. There was nothing that Power Query couldn't handle. And like I said, I could even use reference data from within the Excel workbook, or even from an external file as well. So the sky's the limit. The trial balance, like I said, comes directly from a PDF source. So it came directly from a PDF source. The nice thing is it was a structured PDF, so I could refer to the table, which spans across page 1 and 2, and the navigation into that extracted the data seamlessly. And in that ugly format, I could take it to a format that I would want the TV to be in, just to have the current and the prior year, not have a debit and credit column. I had one column for amount. I have my account number, which is my unique key that allows me to connect all my data sources to one another. And because I've got the chart of accounts, I could actually remove the account name completely, because the chart of accounts contains that data as well. So if I'm working with large data, I tend to remove some data from it, which is what I did on the GL side. On the GL side, I just have the account number. I don't have any other descriptive information, because that information is in my chart of accounts. And if I connect those to one another, then I don't need to contain or carry that information across all 18,000 rows, or let's say there was 100,000 rows. I didn't have to have all that reference data inside those rows either. So that was part of the setup. Like I said, all of this was done manually the first time. But if this is set up properly, then next month I just click on refresh, and it pulls in all of the new data, and refreshes all of my tables, and everything is dynamically updated. And I'll showcase that as well. I also used the GL. The GL actually comes from, and you'll see that if I go to the sample file, the source is actually one of the documents inside my workbooks, and essentially the GL is coming from a folder of data, and essentially I built all of those. You'll see the sources actually come from all of the months. And if I add another month, then I refresh, it'll just add that month to the list, and it will add that information. It will actually union that information at the bottom of my query. So my query keeps on growing, my data keeps on growing dynamically. So it's a dynamic input, and then on the output side becomes a dynamic output. So the nice thing about this, there we go. So the nice thing about it is I can use this data now with many of the dynamic array functions. And I just wanted to quickly showcase a very nice, very unknown functionality that you can use with dynamic arrays as well. And that is using just the AND operator. So I could, for instance, take the unique data's ledger customer names, and I could use the transposed unique entry type, and I could spill a list with customer sales, customer one sales, customer one cash book receipts, for instance. So you can dynamically create an array of information that you would want to do. An example of where I use that quite a lot is I used sequence to spill 10 rows of data, and then I've got my columns running across. And if I want to create a dynamic column reference block, I can just go and essentially select those two data sets, and put an ampersand between them, and that would do a concatenation of that across a dynamically spilled block of information.
Oh, nice. Great.
Like I said, one of the
questions are just rolling in still.
Okay. So let me quickly run through a couple of examples, and then we'll get to questions quickly. Is that okay, Danielle?
Yeah.
Okay. So like I said, one of the MVPs is XLOOKUP, and essentially everything that I've built on this was dynamically built. So you'll see that I basically used XLOOKUP, and I dynamically looked up information from my Power Query data sources. So everything is pulling from Power Query. Opening and closing balance is pulling, but dynamically from Power Query as well. And I've included a formula text to showcase every single function. I'll do this a lot slower in the final video, but then as I also showed, as I said, you can also now do a by column sum, for instance. So this allows me to do a sum across a dynamically spilled range. So I'm actually referring to the whole range, but I could do a sum by column. And previously I would have had to do a by col, and previously I would have had to refer to this little block and say lambda. But these days I actually have all of these functions stock standard, so I could just do a by col sum directly. Previously I would have had to go lambda, and I would have said, you know what, do an x, and then the parameter calculation is the sum of x. But no longer, that's no longer necessary. anyways, so showing just the. Sorry, Danielle, do you want to add
Yeah,
something?
we've got people asking, do we really have to finish after an hour because there's so much to cover and we have so many questions?
Look, I'm not in a rush. I can run
Yeah,
over,
no,
but I don't know about you.
we do need to finish after an hour.
Okay.
But you did say that did you say you were going to do another video where you go into a little bit more detail?
Yeah.
That would be
Yeah.
great, where you can like just a bit more technically, and I can send you. There's a couple of some of the questions are kind of similar. Can
Okay.
I maybe just
Yeah,
give you
please. We can go into questions. Happy to go
um,
into questions.
yeah, I really like, so there's a question from Musa. Do you prefer connecting Power Query directly to an ERP or having Excel files extracting in a folder from the ERP? It's better to connect directly, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It's always better to connect directly to source if you can.
Mm.
Um, it is a lot more powerful, and it makes it so that you can, when you click refresh, you've got the latest information running. Sometimes it's just not possible, and
Sometimes
then
if you can't get that connection, or if
yeah.
not available or whatever, you just have to download it into files, and then it won't be as dynamic, but sometimes that's a bit of a
Yeah.
workaround.
Yeah, so sometimes you need to do a monthly extraction of data. So sometimes you need to like create a folder structure or a structure like this where you dump your data into it, even like a SharePoint folder,
Yeah.
across your business or division, and someone would extract that for you monthly, or maybe you could also use RPA or Power Automate or something to extract the data for you every month, scheduled,
I mean,
and
I'd
then
rather just
just
hook directly into the database, but it's not always going to work. So another
yeah.
one from Tobias. He's had a few questions. Do you have any tips
Yeah.
for performance optimization when reading many CSV files? I want to know
Yeah.
the answer to
So
that. Mhm.
Tobias actually asked that same question on one of our groups yesterday, and I'll
Uh-huh.
still get to his question. I just had to prepare for this as well. But yes, so there's many ways to optimize performance, and what I'll do is I'll cover that in my video as well. So there's ways to enable things like fast load. There's sometimes not the need for refreshes, especially if you're working on like APIs. Sometimes it takes very long to refresh, but it's not necessarily refreshing. It might be a connection issue. So there's many ways to optimize, and essentially sometimes we need to optimize before we hit Excel, before we hit Power Query. So we might want to potentially, let's say if we connect to a database, we might want to create a view first, which does a bit of aggregation first, maybe a bit of transformation first. Then we pull it into Power Query. Then we optimally transform within Power Query, and then we just land into the data model or into a table if necessary. Because I haven't even shown the data model. I mean, this pivot table was built on the data model entirely. I mean, there's so much to show. It's
I mean,
amazing.
the best thing,
There's a lot
in
of
my
things.
opinion, the best thing you can do to optimize is to just get rid of the columns. The fewer, like get rid of any rubbish columns that you don't need. That is the
Yeah.
number one thing I think that slows things down, is having just extra columns that are not necessary. Here's a good one from Anthony. Why does SharePoint really restrict your Power Query models calling on data? It's really frustrating, and it doesn't conform to the concept of continuous improvement. Hashtag, I hate SharePoint. I don't know if you have any comments on that. I mean, we can't sort of
Look. There's ways to optimize from a SharePoint perspective. I think SharePoint is amazingly powerful for what it's meant for. I think once you start maybe integrating, there could be challenges, but there are ways of optimally getting data out and not have restrictions. So maybe we can take that discussion offline as well. Maybe reach out to me and we can
Yeah.
maybe chat about
Oh,
that.
yeah. Someone's just commented on the checklist. Yeah, the new insert checkbox. Love it.
Yeah, I just wanted to showcase that there's many things in modern Excel that a lot of people are not using yet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is available in stock standard Excel. Nothing special, no VBA. This is in my insert table, insert
I
tab.
got it a couple of months ago. How long did it? Have you had it for a while?
I think about 4 or 5 months ago, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly.
Yeah, love
and
it.
then
Great.
and then of course the let I just wanted to show as well. But we can go into more questions. We can go into more questions if we have them. But essentially this is just, I just wanted to show that some of the power. This enables me to do like dynamic arrays, allows me to do a dynamic drop down selection, and essentially get to an account name quickly, and then select the month to display. And now I'm displaying something that doesn't have information in it. But I mean, this is just showcasing some of the options that we could have.
A filter or a filter function? So that's pulling.
It's filter with data validation. Just looking for something that will definitely have a value.
I mean the
just
function.
to show that it
there we go.
work.
So that what
But
is it using a filter function?
essentially I'm using filter. Yes, I'm using filters to actually determine the class selections dynamically, and spelling the account name dynamically. Months is a unique list of months based on my data, so it'll only contain months that have data in them, and then it's just basically normal data validation with named ranges. So it's just using named ranges, allowing me to have a spilled column like this. So this allows me to see the ledger per account across the whole GL at a glance. So quickly built this last night, so can be improved, but I guess the purpose of the session is just to showcase what is available and what is possible.
Love it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. People wanting to say, oh my goodness, there's more. Wow. Amazing. What I just want to see the functions in there. Okay, so you're using a sequence and an X lookup. Love it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to show that you can do dynamic charts these days as well. So this is dynamically moving. So this example is called Life of Capital. So essentially, if I'm 65 at retirement age, and I've got 14 million South African rand in the bank, and I require 50,000 rand monthly, how many years will that provide income for if my annual income escalation is 6.5% per annum, for instance, with a tax rate of 25%? This is based on South African rules. So essentially, this is just showing me when does my money actually start getting less and less. When am I not earning more interest than I'm actually using? And it also allows me to do a little bit of a goal seek and dynamically charts it out for me so that I can see how my capital actually grows at the start, and how it actually how I actually stop earning money at the end and utilize everything, which is a sad picture, but just showcasing some of the dynamic array power, because everything is essentially built dynamically in this as well.
Amazing. We're going to have to just run another one of these. I mean, it's just there's
happy to.
Nothing else for it. We're just going to have to schedule another. So we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much, everybody, for your fantastic participation. So many questions, so much interest. It's an amazing topic. It's one of our most popular sessions. We've still got more than 100 people online. So thank you so much for all of that. And thank you especially to you, Renier. Thank you so much. That was absolutely amazing. Yeah, well, I look forward to what else you have for us. So yeah.
Thanks, Danielle. Thanks for the opportunity. It was wonderful to